One of the 13 principles in Judaism is to believe in Techiyat HaMetim. That one day, Bezat Hashem, very soon, those who have left this world, those who have died, will once again rise. We will see them once again. This is pure emunah, as opposed to the yedi'ah, the knowledge that we have, or the fact as we know it, that Hashem created the world. That's a fact. That we know, that can be proven in the same way that the Torah can be proven that it is divine. There are other things, however, that we cannot easily prove. And one of those is Techiyat HaMetim. We believe. In other words, we know certain things for a fact, and Hashem has proven himself various times. He has kept his word. He took us out of Egypt. Many things have been experienced by the Jews to convince them that this is all real, including future prophecies, because the past prophecies have come true. In other words, the prophets were right. So we know what they are saying in the future most likely will come true. In the same way that we believe Hashem and we trust in him that what he has told us will also come true, including Techiyat HaMetim. As much as this sounds very, very incredible, very much out of this world, something that we don't encounter on a daily basis, nevertheless, our emunah is very, very strong. And as I said, it is one of the principles of our faith. In Judaism, whoever does not believe in Techiyat HaMetim, it is as though he does not believe in the entire Torah. Even though all it is one principle. It's either one or all. I mean, this is very fundamental to Judaism, that one day the dead will rise. Even though this is an emunah, we do have mekorot, we do have sources for it all over the Tanakh. We have sources in other parts of our tradition, in Pirkei Avot. So I will share with you a couple of those sources for those who want some source in the Torah. Nevertheless, even though it is not clear, it is not very, very clear, nevertheless there are quite a few sources. The reason why it is not clear that there will be Techiyat HaMetim is, as we will explain in another lecture, for the same or similar reason why Sachar ve'onesh, reward and punishment, is not explicitly mentioned in the Torah. Hashem leaves out certain things from the Torah so that we should not perform the mitzvot just for that alone. He wants us to trust in him, to believe in him, that it is for our good, for our benefit. So he does not explicitly say, you will be rewarded for it, there will be a world to come. He leaves that out of the Torah, and that is left to our emunah. So Techiyat HaMetim also belongs with those parts of our emunah that are not explicit in the Torah, but nevertheless there's quite a few sources to them. And let me go over some of them. Hashem tells Moshe before he passes away, Vayomer Hashem Moshe, Incha shochev im avotecha, you're about to leave this world and go in the same way as your forefathers, vekam. In other words, the word vekam, the rabbis tell us, is in the future tense, that they will rise. Who will rise? Not only is the reference here to the people who are alive now, that Am Yisrael will unfortunately rebel and commit terrible sins after the passing of Moshe, but it is also referring to Vekam, that there will come a time where there will be Techiyat HaMetim. So this is a derush. This is something that is inferred from a word that is part of our tradition, part of our Masoret, that we know that that is what this word is insinuating to us. Similarly to the word Az Yashir Moshe, Az, also talking about the future, not necessarily about the present. Another example is when Hashem says, V'gam hakimoti et beriti itam, latet lahem. Hashem says that I will fulfill my covenant, my promise, and give them the land, Eretz Canaan. But it says lahem, it doesn't say lachem to you. It should say lachem. I will fulfill my promise, my covenant with who? With the Avot, with our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. How will you fulfill it with them? Personally with them? They're gone. No, they will come back. So obviously from those words, one who carefully analyzes the words of the Torah, there's no extra word. The words are not literally. They have a lot of additional meaning other than the literal meaning. And that is another remez, at least, another hint, that there will be another time, that they will come back and they will receive the land as it was promised to them. Another example is Vatem hadevekim b'Hashem chaim kulechem hayom. Those of you who are attached to Hashem are alive today. What does it mean, alive today? So the rabbis tell us that word today is referencing also le'olam haba. In the same way that you're alive now, there is emphasis on that word, meaning that in the exact same way that you now are alive, you will also be alive in the future. You'll also be part of Hashem later on when you come back, b'tchiyat hametim. Another pasuk, ani amit v'ahyeh. Ani amit v'ahyeh means that I will strike someone dead, amit, v'ahyeh meaning I will bring him back alive. The rabbis tell us that in the same way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu mochetz umerapeh b'makah achat, in the same way that he strikes and heals an individual at the same time, in the same, he can also do with every individual. He can bring about his death, and he can also bring him back alive. In the same way that he strikes and heals, he can also strike someone dead, and afterwards bring him back alive. We're talking not about different people, but even the same individual is able to experience both death and to come back alive once again. In Pirkei Avot, the rabbis talk about what will happen to those who are recently born and what will happen to those who have just left this world. Hayeludim lamud. What is the next step for those who have been recently born babies? Even though we're all excited and we're happy to see a newborn, what is his next step? Death. He has just been born, but what's his next step? The death. What's the next step for those who have left us, for those who are dead? To come back alive. In other words, it's like a cycle, and if you want to look at it Kabbalistically, the cycle also involves a brand new life in a reincarnated form. In other words, there is something called reincarnation, where those who have left this world do come back. And that's a whole different topic, but we do know for a fact that the vast majority of us here have been here several times. And therefore, once a person leaves this world, the next step, if needed, if necessary, is for him to come back. Not Tchiyat HaMetim, but before Tchiyat HaMetim, in the various Gilgulim that he may require for his tikkun, whatever it is that he needs to repair, to make up, whatever it is that he did not do right, and so forth. So in some ways, the next step can be a new brand new life in this world, even before Techiyat HaMetim comes about. Another midrash on the pasuk Hadashim la bekarim rabba emunatecha, that we thank Hashem every morning for giving us a new lease of life, I guess we can call it, that we feel healthy again, that we're able to wake up and continue to live. And this creation or recreation that happens every morning is described so because we're getting back our neshama. There are many people who went to sleep and did not wake up the next morning. So we recognize that by saying Modeh ani lefanecha, we thank Hashem. We are appreciative of the fact that He is giving us a chance to continue to be alive, to continue to breathe. And we notice that every morning how we get back our strength. So it's like we are new people every morning. So in the same way that Chadashim la Bekarim, we add the words Rabba Emunatecha. That in itself, the fact that we are in a way renewed every morning physically, Rabba Emunatecha, that comes to show how great is our faith in you. How it must be that Bezat Hashem, the emunah that we have in you, that you will bring back the dead from the grave, will also come true. And when that happens, you'll be out of a job. You're going to go into the shoe business, yes. That's a good, yeah. No Chevra Kadisha then. So that's an excellent idea. In the shoe business, yeah. My favorite pasuk, however, that somehow we don't think of it. We're looking for all sorts of sources, and somehow we forget about the most famous pasuk of all, that is almost clear, obvious, talking about Tchiyat HaMetim. Daniel, who is known as one of the prophets that talks a lot about Mashiach, that talks a lot about that period of time, of what will happen b'acharit hayamim, in the end of days. Even though a lot of the words that he says are enigmatic, are not clear, and we will only understand them as we get closer to those days, he clearly says that the ketz, which is the final date for Mashiach to come, is hatum v'satum. That information, that date is really sealed. Nobody will ever be able to know exactly. And there's a question as to what is he talking about, because many rabbis did know certain things. Many had Ruach HaKodesh. Many prophets did know approximately. But that's the topic of Mashiach, which is a topic that discusses the various kitzim, the various dates that Mashiach can come. There is a ketz of Achishena, and there's a ketz of Ve'ita. There's a ketz where Hashem can speed about, accelerate the coming of Mashiach when you least expect it. He can come tonight. We're in the middle of the Shi'or, and all of a sudden, Mashiach has come. That's a very big possibility. That's called Achishena. Or there is a ketz of Be'ita, at the very last moment, at the end, in its time. And those who may have had a clue as to when he's coming were most likely talking about Be'ita, because that is the last possible moment when he can come. Nevertheless, we've been always hopeful and praying for a speedier redemption. And therefore, nobody knew exactly when it will come. It was never revealed. The Zohar also says that in every generation, or every certain amount of years, there is a Shana Mesugelet. There's actually a propitious time. The Kabbalists of our time say, for example, the 1948, the secular year 1948, or 1967, during the Six-Day War. These were special years that Mashiach could have come. And this year, 5768, is also a very special, unique year, much more so than almost any other year in the past 100 years. That's how special this year is. So this is a very big year, though we are very hopeful that many good things will happen. And I emphasize good because part of the process will be scary. For those of you who haven't heard, I have a whole lecture about what's next, what we should be expecting. So even though it's a little scary, in some ways it's exciting because we're looking forward to it. We've been looking forward to it for many years. Those of us who've been looking forward to it, of course, will be very happy that it has finally arrived. Nevertheless, these years, or these kitzim, are only propitious. In other words, the years that it may come is a propitious year. We don't know for sure. And we have to do whatever it is that we need to do to help it come about. So Daniel, who talks about the end of days very, very much, mentions the pasuk, "Verabim miyeshenei admat afar yakitzu." He says, many of those who are asleep in the ground will wake up. Ele lechaye olam ve'ele lecherpot ve'lediraon olam. Some will arise and will remain alive forever, because the world to come is an eternal world. And some will get up. For what purpose? For embarrassment. For eternal embarrassment. And they will disappear. In other words, they will not continue to exist forever. Which leads, of course, to the whole idea of Yom Hadin HaGadol VeHaNorah, to the final day of judgment. Because that is what he's alluding to. That in the end, everybody will rise. Everybody. Even the greatest and most evil people that we've known from our history books, they will rise too. You'll get to see them. They will be judged. And based, of course, on the results of the judgment, they will either remain or they will disappear. Because our tradition does say that even non-Jews may have a chelek l'olam haba, may have a share to the world to come. And the idea of the world to come, that concept, we'll talk about separately. What does it mean, olam haba? When will that occur? What is exactly going to happen then? Even though we don't have too much information about that world, we still very much are looking forward to it, and we need to understand what it's all about, because it's also part of our emunah. What is exactly olam haba? Olam haba is an important topic, because if a person thinks that this is all there is, he'll basically behave in the way some people express themselves. You only live once, so you might as well enjoy it. But that's not true. You live more than once. And you do pay very dearly for whatever it is that you did not right. Yesh din v'yesh dayan, everyone is accountable for everything that he has done, and one of these days he's going to have to pay for it, if not in this world, then in the world to come. So that we'll talk about separately another time. So Daniel is very clearly talking about a period of time at the end of days, at the very, very end, where those who have died will get up. But even though everybody's getting up, not everybody will remain. So we need to understand a little bit what will happen when everybody will rise. In other words, besides getting up, there's something called Yom Adin Gadol Ve'Hanora, which the prophets talk about. Hine Yom Ba Bo'er Katanur, as the Navi says, Malachi, a day which is very hot, a day which is very burning, a day where God will judge the entire world. But it's not just the entire world. It is also all the Gilgulim, all those of us who have been here many, many times, every one of those reincarnations will be judged separately. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that soon. But before we talk about the Gilgulim, we need to understand what's the necessity of this day of judgment, this final day of judgment that is so great that Hashem himself will judge everyone. We're talking about a time in our history, very soon, where there will be Hitgalut Hashem Ba'olam Kulo. Hashem will reveal himself in his way of revealing himself to the entire world. Everything will become crystal clear. The truth will be known. At that point, the Navi says what will happen after Yom Adin Gadol Ve'Hanora Tchiyat HaMetim. Bilah hamavet lanetzach. There will no longer be any death. Death will cease to exist. People will stop dying, with a few exceptions, which I'll mention soon. But for the most part, the world will come to an end as we know it. Even though there are various opinions of what will still be functioning in this world. Will there still be cars? People want to know. Will they still be able to use their credit cards? Right? Things like that. According to our tradition, the world will be very similar. Really very similar to the way we know it. But we won't have the burden of taxation. We won't have the worries of war and famine. Things will be more of a Gan Eden. What really will happen, according to the Kabbalah, is we're going back to what the world was before Het Adam Arishon, before the sin of Adam and Chava, which means we're going back to a more perfect state of the world, where there is no sin. And if there is no sin, that means there's no Yetzer Hara that can lead one to sin, right? There's no evil inclination. And since there's no evil inclination, in a sense, there's no need for death, because as I will explain soon, the whole idea of death is as a result of one committing a sin, one needing to part from that sin, separate himself from that sin, and sometimes it is not possible in one's lifetime to do it, even if you've done teshuvah, depending on what sins they are. Sometimes death is the only possibility to get rid of it. And after the death, of course, there's additional tikkunim, additional work to be done, either in Gehenom or in a future Gilgul. So some things cannot be fully accomplished in one's lifetime. They have to be done through one's death. And so I will explain why the day of death, in a sense, even though it's sad, we don't like to see anybody leave, but in the end, it's a benefit for the human being that he actually dies. And that is only because of Het Adam Arishon. So when Mashiach comes, when Tchiyat HaMetim occurs, we will be going back to the original blueprint, I guess if we can call it that way, where there is no death, where man lives forever. At that point, the reason why there needs to be judgment is because everything will come back to its original form. Everything ba al tikuno. Al tikuno means that everything is repaired through Mashiach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself, so everything becomes crystal clear what this world is all about. We will know what the tachlit, what the purpose of this world is, what our mission was. When everything therefore is crystal clear and the curtain comes up and everybody knows everything, at that point what will happen automatically is that the tov will be mitbarer mi'ara. As I've explained before, the good will separate from the evil. Today everything is so mixed up, people do not know what the truth is, what's good, what's bad. There are all kinds of opinions. But at that point everything will become clear. So the Ra has to be expelled. The evil has to be removed. And since it's removed, that removal comes about through judgment. Hashem has to decide who has a part of this Ra, who belongs to the Ra, and he will remove him. Whether he was once alive and he's dead now, still he comes up. Why does he come up? Because we're approaching, after Mashiach and Tchiyat HaMetim, we're approaching a world called Olam HaGemul. Olam HaGemul is a world of reward, which I'll talk about when we talk about Olam Haba. It's called Olam HaGemul. That is the world of reward for all the hard work. Since we're approaching that Olam HaGemul, Hashem has to say, well, what am I going to give him? Does he deserve anything? Well, let's see. Everything has to be fair. There has to be a judgment delivered. So that is why that needs to occur at that time. The Baal Shem Tov explains this a little bit differently. He says that in reality we have Yom Adin various times in our lifetime. Every single night when we go to sleep, a part of our neshama goes up. That part of the neshama not only is able to see visions, not only is it able to see dreams and communicate with those who have left this world, but the neshama really, even though we're not aware, actually gives a din v'cheshbon, an accounting of all that it has done during that day itself. Whatever transpired over it, there's a din v'cheshbon on that day. For that day, so we have a mini judgment every single night. That is why it's a good idea for one to say the entire Kriyat Shema. Not just the Shema Yisrael and the Vayayim Shamoah, but also the Vidui, if you can. It's not obligatory, but if you do so, you will have a better sleep, hopefully. Better dreams. It is a form of teshuvah that you say for whatever that you may not have done properly during that day. Because there's a mini judgment every night. What happens once a year? Rosh Hashanah, judgment over the entire year. Not just over one day. Over an entire year. And what happens when one dies? Yom Hadin on his whole lifetime. And what happens in Yom Hadin HaGadol VeHaNorah? In the end, when Mashiach comes, Tchiyat HaMetim, that is the judgment over all our reincarnations, all of our lives. Right? When one dies, judgment over his entire life that he just lived. When one gets up, he will see all his other, what do we call them? All his other versions, all his other lives, all his other appearances in this world. You know, they may have been in different countries, of course, spoken different languages, but they're all part of the same neshama, and they will all be judged. So, as the Baal Shem Tov explains, there is a need for all these judgments. Always, a person always being corrected, always being told, and the neshama is aware of this. At least when it's alive, it's aware that it's being judged. And sometimes we have an attack, an anxiety attack, and that could be because at that moment you're being judged. That could happen in the middle of the day. According to the Kabbalah, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, if you all of a sudden begin to cry, it's because in that moment the neshama is being judged. So it is possible that a person's books are opened and during the time of danger, when he's at war, when he's in a dangerous situation, or at other times if he's involved in certain things that are totally not proper, there may be an accusation against him. So the Baal Shem Tov explains that we have to be aware of that, constantly aware that we're being judged. And that is the significance of not just waiting till the end, till the last day of your life. And no, every single time, at all times, even though some moments are more serious than others, like Rosh Hashanah. Nevertheless, every night there's something. But at the end, in Tchiyat HaMetim, we need that additional day of judgment because all the lives are taken together. All of their lives will be taken together. And then it will be decided which of the bodies, let's say a person was here 23 times. Okay? The first time that he was around was during the first temple era. Then he came back later in the second temple. Right? There's a lot of years. He could have come back 23 times. Figure it out. Why not? Some more, some less. Every goof that will get up, every body that will get up contains in it, sachakol, and totally, a neshama, a nitzot, actually, a spark of the original neshama. Remember we spoke about neshamot, how they can split into sparks. Just like one candle can light 1,000 candles, you've not taken away anything from the original candle. You've just lit 1,000 candles with the original candle. In the same way, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, the neshama of a person is compared to the light of a candle. That candle can split itself. It could illuminate, it could light, and a part of it. What part? The part that needs a tikkun. The whole neshama doesn't have to come down. You imagine what would happen if the whole neshama would come down and ruin it all over again? Oh no, I have to start all over again? So therefore, the good part of the neshama remains upstairs. Only the one that needs repair, the part of that neshama that needs a tikkun, comes down. Now we don't understand because we don't understand what means parts of neshama. But there are parts of neshama. However, there's only one guf at any given time, one physical body. In order for a person to come back reincarnated, the first body has to be buried. That is why in Judaism, other than giving the proper kavod, respect for the dead, and burying him as soon as possible, we need to bury him as soon as possible, because as long as that body is still not buried, he cannot come back reincarnated. So we're holding back, delaying his tikkun. It's painful. If he needs to come back, let him come back right away. So anyway, the day of judgment will therefore determine which of all the gufot that contain a part of the neshama will remain. Because those gufot, those bodies that did not do what they were supposed to, nichratim, they will be destroyed after the techiyah. They will leave. Only a guf that had any merit, that had any zechut, that was able to do some tikkun will remain. Every one of those gufot, every one of those bodies will be like brothers and sisters, right? We're all from the same parents, brothers and sisters from the same parents. So you will have bodies of the part of the same neshama, and those that remain, they will be able to relate to each other, just like brothers relate to each other. Why do we need Chiyat HaMetim to begin with? What do we need Chiyat HaMetim for? What's Chiyat HaMetim for? The body for the body to come back. Why do we need that to happen? Well, first of all, at the time this happens, we are going back. The world is being restored to its original state, to its pure state, and therefore death was not supposed to have existed. So that will automatically happen, that all those that have died will come back, because the world is restored to what Hashem originally had in mind, that the soul at least, will stick around forever. But there's more to that. What is really happening when Chiyat HaMetim occurs is a period of time until the year 6000 where the body will receive the reward that it deserves. The real reward, the eternal reward, will go to the neshama, to the soul. But the body worked very hard too. It got up every morning and put on tefillin and went to the Beit HaKnesset and gave charity and tremendous self-sacrifice perhaps. Maybe it gave it its life. Maybe that Jewish man or Jewish woman, maybe they gave their life. That means they were willing to sacrifice everything. So that body suffered. It was in pain. That body will be rewarded too. The reward for the body will come about during Chiyat HaMetim, and it will last till the year 6000. That period of time where the body will receive the benefit that it deserves for what it did is called Yemot HaMashiach, the days of Mashiach. Without any kesher, without any connection whatsoever to Olam Haba, to the world to come. Yes? I'm going to get it. I'll get to that. Yeah. Yeah.
Rabbis have the ability to form Chiyat HaMetim too, Rabbi, no?
I'm going to talk about that. Yeah. So when that occurs, when all the bodies will rise, how will they function? Because even though I said that the neshama can split itself, there's only one nefesh. The nefesh is a part of the human being that makes the heart pump. There's only one nefesh. The nefesh is the one that comes back, but there is only one at a time. So we have to give a nefesh to every one of those bodies, a new nefesh. That's what the Zohar says, that during Tahiyat HaMetim, when the dead will rise, even though each body will contain a part of the neshama, the nefesh, there's only one nefesh. The various bodies will receive a new nefesh. Hashem will provide them with a new nefesh, no problem. He can do anything, right? And therefore they will all be able to function just fine. Now, what about all those that were cremated? What about all those that were burnt in Auschwitz? What about all those that drowned? What about all those that were eaten by sharks? All those that were never buried? What about them? They will all come back, regardless of what happened to them, regardless of their fate, regardless of how they died. They all come back. And our tradition even says that the entire recreation of that human body will begin from a small little bone called luz, that is in the back of our neck. In other words, back of our head, by the neck. Small little bone that is indestructible. That one will always remain. Somehow part of it is always around. Not that Hashem needs it, that's just what it is written. That Hashem recreates the entire physical body from that small little bone that will always be around somewhere, somehow. And there's an interesting tradition that says that that little bone only benefits from one meal. Melave Malka. Melave Malka. The fourth meal, right after Shabbat, when we accompany the Queen Shabbat out of, towards the rest of the week, we have an additional meal. It's a very, very important meal to observe sometime after Shabbat is over. So that bone benefits or receives nourishment from that one seudah only. All right, so if they all come back, how will they come back? Let's say somebody died when he was 25 years old, somebody died when he was 95 years old. Our tradition says when everybody comes back, they come back exactly the same way they left. Why? So you should be able to recognize him, right? If you see your grandfather when he was 12 years old, you won't recognize him, right? So they will first come back the same way they left, which means also they will come back with the exact same disabilities, with the same illnesses that they may have had, and then Hashem will cure them. So at first they all come back with the mum, with the disabilities, with whatever problems they may have had, and then they will be cured. Only in order for us to recognize them, so nobody should ever say, oh, this is somebody else. He never came back. No, they will all come back so we can identify them. What is that? Yeah, of course, yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly, yeah. They will all be dressed, they will all look nice. You mentioned cremation. Yeah. What I was talking about was not voluntary cremation, but unfortunately what happened to many who were burned at the stake. But one has to realize a very, very important point, and that is that if you have a relative, a friend, or anybody that you know that in his will expressed his desire to be cremated, don't follow those instructions. You're doing him a disfavor that he's unaware of at the time now that he's alive. He'll only know it later on. So if you can stop it, stop it. And I'll tell you why, for 3 reasons why it is forbidden for one to be cremated. First of all, number 1, there's a mitzvah to be buried. There's a mitzvah that we learn out from a pasuk that one should be buried in the ground. And when one does not do that, basically one is not following that mitzvah. One is going against the Torah. But it's not just a mitzvah. It's when you do not want to be buried, it shows that you do not believe in Tchiyat HaMetim. Because the whole idea of burying the dead, putting him away, is in some ways a statement that we believe that one day they will come out of their graves. So by not wanting to do that, it shows in a way that you completely deny that possibility, that you just want to get rid of it in any way, in any possible way. Besides that, it is a zilzul in the kavod of the met. It is a form of disrespect for the dead to treat him like that, to just burn his body. And I know some religions and some groups in the world, that's what they do to dispose of their dead, but Judaism is against that. It's more respectful to take care of him properly in the grave and not to, of course, not to dissect him, and not to take his organs away, and not to do autopsies, if at all possible. All of this in deference to the kavod of the met, the honor of the dead. Besides that, according to the Kabbalah, one needs to remember that in the kever itself, there is something called chibuta kever and rima vetole'ah. The body will decompose, the body will experience a certain amount of judgment in the grave itself. So the decomposition, that process where the body decomposes, the pain that the body goes through in the kever itself, is a kapara. It acts as an atonement. It is therefore a good thing for the body that it is in the grave and that decomposes. Now there are some tzaddikim who never decomposed until this very day, hundreds and thousands of years. That is a special zchut. There are some that have a zchut that their body will not decompose. They don't need that kapara, but whoever does decompose, and most people do, needs to know that this is also a kapara for whatever it is that they did. Yes, the neshama is actually mourning over its body. It sees how it decomposes, and it experiences a form of pain. It's not exactly a physical pain, but it does experience the pain. And this lasts for up to about a year, I think, depending on the weather and the conditions of the soil. It sometimes happens faster, and sometimes it's a little slower. Yeah.
You once mentioned, Rabbi, that someone who dies of Kedusha Hashem, that they don't have that suffering in the grave, they go straight to Shemayim.
There's no chibuta kever. Chibuta kever is a process, a brief stage, where the soul is put back temporarily into the body by a certain angel, which beats the body. And the idea of beating the body is to remove the klipa. Since we're talking about it already now, I might as well elaborate a little bit more. That is the benefit of death. Because when a person dies, what happens is several things. First of all, that physical body, which was limiting the soul, in a sense, sometimes from doing the right thing, separates itself. That binyan, that structure that we call the physical body, neheras, has just been destroyed, has just fallen apart. We look at it as something very, very sad, and especially if that individual was young. But in reality, that is a benefit for the body, because sometimes, because of that physical body, it is limited from really expressing fully what it is capable of. In other words, the neshama, depending on the type of physical body that she is caged in, may or may not have done whatever it is that she really should have done. So the separation of that physical limitation from the body, from the neshama, is a very good thing. It allows one to completely and finally separate itself from that which was troubling it, from that which caused it to sin. Plus, at the time of death, the death itself, the neshama being plucked out of the body, is a way of removing the kelipa, as the Kabbalah calls it. The kelipa is like a shell, an impure shell that is stuck to us ever since Chet Adam Harishon, ever since the first sin of man. There is a certain kelipa, a certain impure shell that can only be removed by death. That's the only way it can be removed. Actually, there have been tzaddikim who were able to remove it completely without death, and there are very few. The rabbis call them the very few who have died not because of the seduction of the snake. Shelo metu bet yoshel nachash. In other words, they actually went into Gan Eden. They went into Gan Eden directly. They were alive. They never even died. Yeah. There are some who did not die because of their sins, and the only sin they have, it was that kelipa that was on them because of Chet Adam Harishon. Also on a very high level. In other words, no sin of their own, except for the common sin to all humanity, as a result of that kelipa that's still there. So the death is a favor to them, that it is able, and that's the only thing that is able to separate or to break out that kelipa that is on them. So in a sense, just like you take a piece of pottery and you shatter it and you remake it in the oven, you rebuild it, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do that with the physical human body. He broke it. In other words, he decomposed it, got rid of it, the old one, the imperfect one, and will recreate a new one, a brand new one, a fresh one, which is necessary. In other words, because the old one is, you can call it contaminated, broken, unless of course he was a tzaddik. But for the most part, we all have that kelipa, that shell, that needs to be removed, and what removes that is death. So death is a necessity. Death, as tragic as it and sad as it may be, is a necessity, because in the end it results with the kapara, the death itself, that experience and that removal of the physical body of the kelipa. Yeah.
Let's say if a soul has multiple people,
Right.
and whether male or female, do all those people per se come back? And
Yeah, everybody comes back, male and female.
from that one soul.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier, that in Tchiyat HaMetim, all of one's Gilgulim will come back, all of one's reincarnations will come back, everyone in their own body, sharing the same neshama.
It won't be one opposite person.
No, everyone shares a part of that neshama, because a neshama is just a portion of a bigger neshama. Each one will receive their own nefesh, which is the living spirit, because there's only one living spirit at a time. There can be many parts of a neshama, sparks, but there's only one nefesh, living spirit, and therefore they will all receive a brand new nefesh at that time when that happens. In order for them to be able to function, you have to have a nefesh. Yeah.
Question again about the people who died on Kedusha Hashem.
Right.
What's the benefit to them as opposed to someone who just dies a natural death? Do they have less punishment in the grave, Rabbi, because of the fact that they died because they were
Well, we know that anybody that died sanctifying Hashem's name is in a very, very high level. There's a special department upstairs just for those who died al Kiddush Hashem. So they're in a very tremendous high level. The reward is, of course, immense for what they did. Yes?
Weird question. What if one had a sex change during their life? Would they come back as before the operation?
Well, the neshama cannot be changed. You are what you are. What has happened to the physical body doesn't make a difference. Yeah. Anyway, as a result of the Yetzer Hara being removed, when Tchiyat HaMetim occurs, there's no more Yetzer Hara. There will therefore be no more death. People will continue to exist forever, for eternity, until the year 6000. Until the year 6000, which our tradition says is the end of this physical world as we know it, after which the Kadosh Baruch Hu renews the world, and it will be a spiritual world. And I'll talk about that when we speak about Olam Haba. Now, since we only have 232 years to go to the year 6000, guess what? Mashiach has to come now, because Tchiyat HaMetim has to occur soon. Why? Because we have to have enough time left over to be able to experience all that is awaiting us. Binyan Bet HaMikdash, the building of the Bet HaMikdash. Malchut Mashiach, the reign of Mashiach. The benefit for the goof, the reward for the goof, for the body, all of that has to happen, and it can't be just experienced in 1 year. It can happen at the last possible moment, at the very end. So you realize how close we are, because we're getting closer to the year 6000. As far as death, even though I said that there will be no death, the Navi does seem to say that there will be some. And he probably referring to non-Jews who, even if they pass away, they will pass away at a late age. It says a young man will be considered one who has died at the age of 100, the prophet says. So there may be some death after Tchiyat HaMetim, but it will be limited and it will be at a later age. Those who are still alive at the time, B'ezrat Hashem, all of us who will witness it, one opinion says they will die in order for them to also go through the process called Tchiyat HaMetim. Just to feel the death, to get a brand new body or to get a new start, and to go through that same process. So that won't last too long. It may be for 2-3 minutes. It won't be for long, but it will be a process that even those who are around will go through. What's the process exactly? How does it occur? In what stages does it happen? We learn out from a pasuk that we say every morning in our prayers, Bonei Yerushalayim Hashem. First thing that will happen is that Kadosh Baruch Hu rebuilds Yerushalayim. And he's not talking about the Plaza Hotel or the King David Hotel. When we're talking about the building of Yerushalayim, we're talking about the building of Beit HaMikdash. We're talking about the spiritual building of the city, not just the physical structures. Bonei Yerushalayim Hashem, what comes next? Nitchei Yisrael Yechanes. After that will come the ingathering of all of Am Yisrael, including the 10 tribes. Even though there's already some ingathering now, there's already some aliyah from the late 1800s. And actually even before, from the 1700s. We have a major aliyah since recently, and we're having continuous aliyah now. But we still have the majority of the Jews are in Chutz La'aretz, right? The majority of the Jews are in the diaspora. So when Mashiach comes, there will be a stage of Nitchei Yisrael Yechanes, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring everybody home. So we have so far Bonei Yerushalayim Hashem, Nitchei Yisrael Yechanes, and after that, Harofeh Lishvuro Elev u'Mechabesh La'atzev Otam. After that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will heal us. Will heal us, meaning those who are Shvurei Lev, those who are heartbroken because of all the tragedies and all the persecutions and all the terrible experiences that we had personally or as a nation. He will cure us of all the ailments. And Mechabesh La'atzevotam will therefore include the ultimate cure of all, Tchiyat HaMetim, to bring back those who have died. Where will it all begin? Not in Los Angeles, not in Miami. It's going to begin, Tchiyat HaMetim will first begin in Eretz Israel. That's where it begins. Why do you think many people want to be buried there? They want to have front seats. They want to come first, yeah. But just remember, in order to get up first, it's not enough that you live in Eretz Israel. You have to deserve it too. In other words, somebody who lived his entire life in Chutz La'aretz and just wants to be buried there, Israel says, I don't want you. I don't want your dead corpse here. Don't do me any favors. Stay where you are. So he will be kicked out before he's able to come back. Those who have supported Eretz Israel, who loved Eretz Israel, even though they could not live there all the time, they will have a bigger share in the Tchiyat HaMetim. In other words, they will get up earlier. Nevertheless, those who have been buried outside, the Rabbi tells us, will go through mehilot, through subterranean tunnels until they reach Eretz Israel. And this will be a little bit painful if you have to roll and come until you reach Eretz Israel. So there's no doubt in the world that being buried in Eretz Israel is a big zechut, but it's only on condition that you had some helek, some kesher, some connection with Eretz Israel. Only then will that burial there make a difference. So those who are in Eretz Israel get up first. Tzaddikim in Eretz Israel get up before everybody else. Why does it make a difference who gets up first? Because the earlier you get up, the more time you will have to enjoy Yemot HaMashiach. Because it's going to make a big difference in time. Because according to our tradition, Tchiyat HaMetim takes 40 years until it's completed. So some people get up in the very beginning, some at the last year of Tchiyat HaMetim. So you have an advantage of 40 years here. Anyway, so because of all of that, being buried in Eretz Israel is a tremendous zechut. The question is where in Eretz Israel. Obviously, it makes no difference so much, but Har HaZeitim is very, very special because of the tradition that says that that's where it all begins, and that mountain will split when Hashem reveals Himself. Har HaZeitim, therefore, the Mount of Olives, is very, very close to our heart. In other words, it's very, very important in our tradition, but some people, of course, have concerns about being buried there because of troubles with the Arabs and so forth, and they have buried elsewhere in Har HaMenuchot. It makes no difference. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. Some people put an emphasis on being buried close to their relatives. That does not make so much of a difference. You know, as long as it's in Eretz Israel and Yerushalayim, of course, there's no doubt that it's very special. just want to spend a few minutes with those who still have doubts about whether Tchiyat HaMetim can happen. After all, we're talking about something very, very different, something that has supposedly never occurred, something that is very, very incredible to believe. How do we convince someone other than talking about the sources that we have, our tradition? It's emunah. How do we convince someone that, you know what, this is something that will really happen? By the way, why should we want to convince someone? We're not just talking about convincing him so that he should have emunah, strong faith in all that is Jewish. But imagine you're going to comfort someone who just lost. I don't like to use the word lost because he's really not lost. Somebody who just passed away in the family, especially if it was tragic. How do you comfort someone? If he does not believe in Tchiyat HaMetim, it's very difficult. You follow me? He's gone. He thinks he's gone. That's it. He's gone. How can we bring him back? So let's talk a little bit about the proof that we have that this will happen, other than our sources. If you read Tanakh, of course you have to believe that the Tanakh is true. You will find incidents of Tchiyat HaMetim that already did occur. Eliyahu Navi brought somebody back alive after he was completely dead. Completely dead. Elisha HaNavi, who followed Eliyahu, also had a similar incident where he brought somebody back from the dead. Yehezkel, one of the greatest prophets, not only had an incident, he had an entire valley of dry bones. People who were dead for a long time, not just recently, like with Eliyahu and Elisha, they all of a sudden got flesh on those bones and got up. And one of the rabbis in the Gemara says, and I'm a descendant of one of those that got up. So this is a real Tchiyat HaMetim of a group of people that actually occurred in the past, and it's documented. Not everybody knows about it. Well, we do. Right? This has happened. We have stories about Mavet Klini, people who have had a near-death experience, people who have died temporarily for 2 hours, who have come back, who have experienced real death in a sense, or just about all the symptoms that keep them alive stopped functioning, and they came back, and that is a form of Tchiyat HaMetim too. What I like to use as an example, however, of Tchiyat HaMetim being so real is the fact that some people really dream with a niftar, with an individual who has passed away that they knew of or did not know of, and it's not just a memory of the past. That niftar, that man or woman who passed away, actually gives them information, and that it's impossible for them to know unless they're still around somewhere in some dimension. The neshamot, we believe, continue to exist. When the body is buried in the ground, we know that's not the end of him, because the ikar, the essence of the human being, is not the body, it's the neshama. The neshama is still alive somewhere. That is what we call hasharat hanefesh. Judaism very much believes that the neshama, the soul, continues to exist. The man and the woman is not gone. They're still around. They're very, very much around. But people don't always think about it because they're so used to, for the past 75 years, they had a physical connection of sorts with that man or woman, and they are no longer there. Yeah, and that is very, very sentimental, and that is very normal for us to feel. And Baruch Hashem, the rabbis tell us that those feelings of pain leave us after 12 months. Imagine if you were in mourning for more than 12 months for the rest of our life. It would be terrible, too difficult to bear. So Hashem does us a favor, and we forget a little bit about that pain. But the neshama continues to exist, and we see that from dreams. If that niftar, that man or woman who passed away, comes and tells us and gives us information as though they're completely alive, or even more than that, what about the apparitions? That's even more than a dream. And they have been around always in every generation, in every country and culture. Then we know that that individual is still around in some form. That is what ghosts are all about. I mean, they call it ghosts, they're spirits, whatever you want to call it. There are all sorts of stories in just about every civilization and culture that these spirits are still around. If that's the case, that means they're not gone. What's the big deal for Hashem to give him a new physical body if the main thing is still there? And as the rabbis tell us, by the way, if somebody was never here before and was able to be born, The more so, Kol Sheken, one who was already here, is able to come back. It's logical, it's common sense. If you were never here before, this is your first time here, you've just arrived, Baruch haba, from nothing, you were able to come from nothing and come into this world, then the more so, it makes more sense that somebody who's been here already before should be able to come back. If you were never here, you can come from nothing, then the more so, if you were already here, why it's a big deal holding you back from coming back? And you want a proof for that? Look at a hita. Look at a grain of wheat. A grain of wheat. It was something till now. You bury it in the ground, and what happens to it? It first rots. That grain of wheat will first rot, and from that grain of wheat will sprout another stalk. New wheat. And you know what they found in some of the tombs of the Paro? That been sealed for 2,500 years? Grains that sprouted after they came in contact with water. After so many years. Somehow it preserved whatever it had, that it can sprout with just a little bit of water. And from that hita, from that grain of wheat, you can imagine the same thing with a human being. After all, the human being, the tipa, that where he comes from, that from a little drop, it was a nothing. And he became a beautiful tree, right? A whole human being. That same nothing of a tipa can come back again, once more. No big deal. It's just that we're not used to it. We don't see it every Monday and Thursday. We don't see people getting up from the grave. Except in the movies maybe, right? Right? But we don't see these things. Therefore, we're not used to it, and it's hard for us to believe it, but that's part of our emunah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Famous Gemara where two rabbis got fought on Torah and one killed the other.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, Rabbi,
Yeah.
what permission did the rabbi who's still alive have to resurrect his friend? What permission?
Well, that's a good example of the incidents that are recorded in the Gemara of people that actually died under different circumstances, who actually came back or were brought back. And it's not important the reasons right now, but the fact is a true fact and a good example of incidents that are recorded of people who have actually died. And there actually is a Gemara that says they used to go to the grave for 3 days just to make sure that the guy is really dead. Maybe he got out. You know, there was a woman not too long ago who was in a refrigerator. Her body was in a refrigerator. And a big tzaddik in Israel woke up in the middle of the night. He had a dream that she was still alive. And he went to the hospital. And he told the guys, open the door. There's somebody there who's alive. He said, what are you talking about? This isn't talking about the refrigerator for dead people. No, the houses. They sometimes store, dead people in refrigerators. Sure enough, I don't know if they heard the knock on the door. But as soon as the door was open, they saw her standing in the bed. You know. And they probably fainted. But this happens all the time. Yes. And these are individuals who have been dead for a couple hours and sometimes a couple days. It can happen. It has happened, yes.
What is the spiritual state of somebody in a coma?
Somebody who's in a coma, part of his neshama has left him. Right? But the nefesh is still there. That is why his bodily functions are still somehow functioning. He's able to breathe, maybe not on his own, but as long as there is a heart pumping blood and there is oxygen going through, you can keep that physical body alive. But a part of the neshama is no longer there. Anytime a person has even a clinical death, in other words, where there's no more even brain waves in the brain, a part of him has left him. Sometimes all of it has left him. And but that is more dangerous. That in order for al pi derech hateva, naturally for that individual to come back alive and function normally without any damage, it has to be within a short time. We've seen miracles that it's been several hours and nevertheless they came back. Yeah.
There's no permission for a rabbi to
Well, these we're talking about Tanaim and Amoraim. They were great. They were so great that they were on the level of being able to bring back Tchiyat HaMetim, which is, by the way, the highest level one can attain in this physical world. You know, there's various levels, spiritual levels that one can attain. One of them being divine inspiration. One of them being being able to see and talk to Eliyahu and Navi. These are levels. These are greatest spiritual achievements that you are able to know certain things and to see certain things. The highest of all is the ability to be Mechayem Metim, is to bring somebody who is dead, bring him alive. And there was a story that I told you a long time ago about a woman in Miron. In the 1920s, the English were in control, and she took her child to get a halakha, to cut his hair. She had made a promise. This was her only boy. She had made a promise to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Baruch Hashem, after many years, she didn't have children. She made a promise as soon as she has one, she will take him there. So, Baruch Hashem, you can imagine the celebration, the joy of everybody coming there, the food, and all of a sudden, the child died on her. Over there in Miron. She was a very strong woman, and she did not lose hope. She did not despair. Everybody ran away because they were afraid that this was contagious. This was a time where there was a contagious disease going around. So they closed up the place, the British police, and they really did not allow anybody to go in. But this woman somehow gathered the courage, took the child with her, went inside to the grave of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, put him on the grave and says, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, you promised me this child. In other words, I promised you that I will bring him here if I had a child and make the halakha here. And apparently I was blessed with this child. I kept my promise, and because of your zechut, I was able to have this child. And now he's been taken away from me. I'm not leaving this spot until you bring him back to me, that same child that you gave me. And she was there crying her heart out and praying, and after a couple hours, the child opened up his eyes and asked his mother for some water. Yeah, in other words, all of a sudden, little by little, the child began to recover, and that was a tremendous miracle of Tchiyat HaMetim in our days. So this does happen from time to time, but we take it for granted that this is just okay. So it was just a couple of hours. No, but it is still an authentic example of Tchiyat HaMetim. Just that somebody who's been buried for 2,000 years, it's harder for us to believe because everything is gone. But what's the big deal for him to do? He can do anything. He has created us the first time around. He can recreate us again. And it's going to be the exact same body. We've talked a little bit about Gilgulim. A person could have been here many times. But what happens if somebody married 2 wives, 2 women during his lifetime? Who will he get when he gets up? The one that gave him the hardest time. Just joking. Why? That's true. You're 100% right. Only if the 2 of them are his soulmates. If, it does happen sometimes that a woman was married to somebody for 55 years. Okay? She had a long life with her husband. She has many children with him. And then when she was 79 years old, she married somebody who was 82. Right? It happens all the time. She's not going to go back to that 82-year-old man. She doesn't really have that much to do with him, except that they kept each other company. That's not his zivug. But when somebody was married to 2 women for a good number of years, and especially if he had children with the 2 of them, and they have a very strong kesher, it's very, very likely that the 2 of them were his soulmates. One of them could be more than the other. Never, that doesn't really make a difference. So the 2 of them, will, like you said, will be his. But otherwise, when it's only one real soulmate, then one does go together with his or her real soulmate. Just want to finish with what the rabbis tell us, that even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this world in a way that everything functions by itself through a certain system of laws, like nature, there are certain things that he manages by himself, personally. We spoke about this before when we talked about Shidduchim, how he's involved personally with bringing people together, because he knows which neshamot go together. In the same way, the rabbis tell us, Gimel maftechot. Shlosha maftechot bidei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There are 3 keys that he has and only that he has. He opens and he closes whenever he wants. 3 things that he does on his own, without any malachim, any help. One is the maftech of a chaya, of a woman who gives birth. He decides when she will have the children. He opens and he closes. He decides. That is why we need to turn to him, not just to doctors. He is the ultimate, the one to decide. Children, who will have them? The second maftech is the maftech of rain. He decides when there is rain, not El Niño or La Niña. Yeah. He decides if there will be rain or not. It's ultimately his decision. And the third maftech is the maftech of Tchiyat HaMetim. He will be the one to bring it about. Nobody else can accomplish something like that. Nobody else is able to do something like that. In other words, in the end, to bring back all these people who have been gone for so long, only he can do that. That's why, when that does happen, it will be a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. It will be a tremendous sanctification of Hashem's name to see something that is so unbelievable. And that is why when we comfort somebody who's in mourning, what do we say to them? Hamakom yenachem etchem betoch shar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. Only Hashem will comfort you amongst all those who are mourning in Yerushalayim. Why only Hashem? Because what can we do to the man? What can we say to them? We can share in their pain, which is important that he know. Because when you share in his pain, that means it's not only his pain, it's our pain too. And that makes the person feel a little bit better. But can you bring back the dead person? No. So what can you really do? It's just to be there for him, to help him out, to talk to him, to remind him that Hashem natan v'Hashem lakach, that Hashem has given, Hashem has taken. In other words, to strengthen his emunah during a time which is very, very delicate. But we cannot do more than that. Therefore, hamakom yenachem otchem. Only Hashem will comfort you. Why Hashem? Because he can do something that nobody else can do. He can bring back the dead. And that's the greatest consolation of all, when he is able to bring back that man, that woman that you've loved so much that you thought is gone. Is there any greater consolation than that? Is there any greater favor, any greater thing like that? There's nothing greater than that. That is why Makom, only Hashem can really comfort us. And Hashem, Bezat Hashem, will comfort all of us very, very soon. And that is why we say Hashem, that as Yemaleh Sechok Pino, when that day comes, our mouth will be full of laughter and joy, when we will realize that this world was not worth getting so upset about, and so crazy about, and so nervous about, because this world is a temporary world. Even though it's almost 6,000 years have gone by, it's all like one day in the eyes of Hashem. All the troubles that we've had, the people who were butchered, the people who suffered, who were burned, we're going to see them back again. In other words, all that they have gone through was just temporary. Temporary pain for an everlasting reward that they will receive as a result. And that is why we very much emphasize in the Tfilat HaMidah in the Shmoneh Esrei. We praise Hashem, the greatest praise of all, of Baruch Mechayeh HaMetim. That is one of the praises that we say, that was one of the blessings that we make. And when we do say that, we have to have full emunah. And we have to say with the proper kavanah that we really, really believe in it. Because Bezat Hashem, if we are very, very much believing in what we say, it will help us bring this about very, very soon. Amen.